Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Today we're talking about wellness for your space. And I want to ask you if you've checked out Xceligent, Xceligent.com. That's a company that tracks commercial real estate around the U.S. Check out Xceligent.com. Well, like I said, we're talking about wellness for your space today, and I think it's an extremely important discussion. It's something I've been looking forward to for a long time as I've helped companies with their space needs, when I help investors and landlords with their real estate. I don't think there's enough of an understanding of how important wellness is to all of us. Please welcome my next guest. It's Scott Muldavin. He's the 2017 chair of the Counselors of Real Estate. He's also president of the Muldavin Company. Scott is joining us on Skype. Scott, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
Well, Scott, I've interviewed you before in various cities, and I knew then that this wellness aspect of real estate and corporate decisions is something you've been involved in and know a lot about for a long time. I appreciate you being on the show. And first of all, some people might be skeptical. I mean, what is wellness really a problem, or is this just some fad or something?
Well, that's a good question. Wellness is definitely a problem, both health issues and related productivity issues. And it's really, I've been working for this for about 10 years on the financial aspects of sustainability. And in doing that work, I came to understand how important health and wellness was. And more recently, within the last few years, the company, the International Well Building Institute, came up with the well building standard. And what they've done is, with $30 million or more of research, established over 100 different building interventions. And when you actually look at the underlying science that relates things in buildings to health, it resulted in an epiphany for me. After 35 years of developing and advising and investing in buildings, I now know that with a little bit of money and intent, you can actually seriously affect the mental and physical health of people.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I was thinking about it this morning. The office building I work in, I imagine 1,000 people grab the same handle to walk in the front door that I did today. I'm maybe a little bit of a germaphobe, but what are some of the common issues that may create a problem in buildings today?
Well, one of them is indoor air quality, which is probably the most. You have mold. I guess we had the sick building syndrome from many years ago, but you have mold and respiratory disease. You have formaldehyde, particulates, different types of humidity that can cause effect, volatile organic compounds. Lighting is a really interesting one relative to stress. It can create sleep problems, concentration problems. You have water. Dehydration is a huge issue, and particulate matters and bacteria in the water can create all kinds of problems. And then a lot of things in building interiors, we have obesity, and you have a concentration of light that can affect your stress. You have acoustic issues, ergonomic issues that can affect the pain in your body and in your hands. Just a whole bunch of things that affect both your health but also related productivity, which will become important when you look at the financial aspects.
Well, Scott, I can't believe you told me all that. Now my back hurts and my eyes hurt. I'm in an office building right here. So how healthy are typical buildings today?
And that really is the question, and it actually is one of the problems. We actually don't know, and that is the problem. It turns out that through LEED and BREEAM, which is the Green Building Certificate in Europe and the UK, or Green Star in Australia, we do know they cover about 10 or 15. They do ventilation and some of these issues, but they don't cover most of these health problems and or measure them. So we don't really know, other than we know that a lot of the things I just mentioned are still existing problems out there. Yeah,
I'm going to have my air tested in my building, and I'm curious if I should check that door handle. I might not be happy with what I find there. But what about financial sense? I think especially when you're running a business, the bottom line counts. When you're running real estate, obviously the NOI counts. So how financially does wellness make sense? Does it work financially in the certification itself?
Right. To think about healthy buildings financially, you actually have to separate corporations or owner occupants who have employees in the buildings from investors. And for a corporation, probably the easiest way to think about just about wellness is if you think about corporations on average spend $700 per person per year on wellness, irregardless of health, which is more like $9,000 or $10,000 per person. And if you want to introduce the well building standard, this new certification program that can actually where they test and monitor and measure and fix a lot of these health problems, that costs at most $400 per person per year. So it's very cost effective for a corporation to do that. Also, recruiting and retention has been identified as the #1 problem for corporate America. 25% of all leasing in America is technology related. So people are really going to be the key issue. And having a healthy building, one that you can actually brand and certify as healthy, can be incredibly important. Every time you lose an employee, it's 30 to 150% of salary to replace them. And turnover rates in the Fortune 500 are 20 to 30%, and in companies like Google up to 100% per year. So huge value there. But the most important issue in health and wellness relates to productivity.
Yeah.
There are things like indoor air quality. There's lots of research, a lot of which I've published, which you can find on my website, which shows productivity gains of 8 to 10% for various indoor air quality by improving ventilation and other types of things. You talk about daylighting. A study that looks at a whole bunch of different daylighting strategies shows productivity increases of near 5%. Temperature, if you control temperature better, 4 to 6%. Reducing noise, 46%. And all kinds of these things. Increasing productivity is hugely important, and mitigating health costs, which have gone up 60% over the last 10 years. So those are all the things for an owner-occupant that translate into return on investment. Would you like to me to go into investors now, or would you have some more questions?
Yeah, I think the investors, the real estate owners, is another interesting aspect of this, because you think for a company running a business, obviously it makes sense. You want more productivity. You want your people healthy, happy. You want to reduce turnover. You want to retain your people, and you want to make them healthy. But when it comes down to an owner's perspective of a building, it's kind of another look at it. I was thinking about it this morning. I mean, of those 1,000 people that touched the door to come in my building today, the owners, the investors in this building that I'm in, they want their tenants to be successful. They want their occupants to make money so they can pay the rent. So how does an owner of a building gauge the value of wellness certification?
Fortunately, it's very much like traditional real estate analysis. Your job, if you're a building owner or an investor, is to actually do things that your customers want, be customer centric. So having a healthy building is very customer centric. I mentioned all those things, why occupants like healthy buildings and more productive buildings. But to give you a sense of the financials, I have detailed financial analyses, again, available in papers on my website, which show that if you actually increase productivity just 0.5%, and I mentioned all those different interventions that can, each intervention alone can be 0, 5, or 10% increases in productivity. If you look at all of those and only increase productivity 0.5%, you have nearly a 300% return on investment for a corporation. So now you're an investor and you say, well, that's pretty compelling for my tenants. So if I actually put in this healthy building stuff and I can promote it because I have a certification like a well building standard, I can attract premier tenants. And a perfect example of this is Australia is a good market where It's a smaller market, and they've gone really big into this well building standard and healthy buildings. And there's an example of Deloitte, which is going to go take a major space, which is actually requiring in its RFP to be in a well-certified building. It's really sort of the leading edge of this. But the other kinds of tenants that have gone in big for the well building standard and healthy buildings include Citigroup, Wells Fargo Bank, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, Genentech, Microsoft, and on and on. So it's all these any tenant that has a recruiting problem and these big financial tenants, 7 out of 10 of big banks, major technology companies are all part. So if you want to attract premier tenants to drive your building, the well building standard is a really good thing. The other evidence from an investor perspective is that if you look at all the studies of sustainability and how it affects value in office buildings, they show 3 to 6% increases in rents, 5 to 10% increases in occupancy, and maybe 5 to 10% increases in value. And in a Bentel Kennedy study, really the best of its kind recently, they did a study over 10 years, and they've been doing sustainability for over that time period. And they've established, looking at even more detailed information because they have a great database, 3.7% increase in rents, 6% increases in tenant retention, increases in occupancy with 8 to 10% increases in value. And it turns out that if you look at all of that value evidence and rent evidence, that health and productivity is a huge part of that.
But what does it cost if you have a 60,000 square foot building, a small building like that, and you want this entire building to be certified, wellness certified? What are some pricings? You mentioned for the corporate side, it's $400 per person per year might be a number to think about. How about for the building owner? Is it similar?
No, so for the building owners, it's quite a bit less. And the $400 per person one time was for a corporation that actually is doing the well building standard on their core and shell, as well as doing their entire interior. So if you're an investor, what you're doing is you're going to actually do a core and share on your existing building. And the tenants, what you're actually doing is you're being able to partner with your tenant by making your core and shell building have a well building standard. It makes it easier and less costly for your tenant to actually implement the well building standard on their space. They would do that independently, and there's things that you can do to help them through your lease and some other things. So really, for an investor, so the costs are maybe a third of that $400 for an investor, because they're just focusing on the core and shell, and they really become a partner with their tenants.
And most of that is one time, not annually.
Yeah, it's a one-time cost. There's a small operating expenses to manage and monitor some of the things, but it's really a fairly de minimis operating cost increase.
Okay, well, now all my listeners and viewers are, as a country friend of mine says, ruined. Now everyone is going to want to own a well-certified building, I think, and they're going to want to really work and be in a well-certified building. So, Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the information. Great as usual.
And thank you very much. And for any owner out there that thinks that they can avoid this issue, you have all the people that are your employees and customers are going to be able to measure the things on their wristbands fairly soon with all the wearables. So this is something that owners, investors, and corporations can't hide from, and if they adopt it, it's something that can be really helpful for their businesses.
Yeah, good point. It's something that's tenant reps, when we're representing tenants, we come in the building, it's on our checklist. We want to know about it. So, Scott, thank you. And we'll put a link to Scott's website with these white papers and all the information that Scott mentioned. We appreciate you watching and listening to the show today. Be sure and join us next week. And until then, be sure you always lead, learn, and laugh. And join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show.